50 Tarkin warships broke formation. Their reactors were already past critical. Valen watched the telemetry cascade across his bridge display. Temperatures climbing past the point of no return, hull integrity warnings screaming in 17 languages, none of them Tarkin. The warships didn't slow. They accelerated. Straight into the maw of the Devourer dreadnought, which was approximately the size of a small moon and considerably less pleasant to be near. The dreadnought's biomass absorption arrays were still extending when the first reactor went. Valen had been in space for 31 years. He had a commendation for the pellucid corridor engagement and a scar on his left foreleg from something he didn't discuss at formal dinners. He had never seen anything like this. I'll be honest with you. Standing on that bridge, watching 50 ships choose the last thing they would ever do, I understood, for the first time, why the Terrans had spent 100,000 years getting ready. That same metallic taste in the recycled air. He'd first noticed it 6 days ago, standing at his forward observation port while the spatial anomaly surrounding the Aegis System simply ceased to exist, the way a held breath finally releases. 6 days since the universe quietly rearranged its assumptions. The anomaly had held for 1,000 years. Every survey probe the Concorde had sent across that border returned scrambled or didn't return at all. Officially, the Aegis System was classified as a natural navigation hazard. Unofficially, the Theoretical Physics Division had 17 competing explanations. Valen had read 2 of them. He'd stopped there. What replaced the anomaly was not what anyone's models had predicted. His sensors registered megastructures in Terran orbit, ring stations he thought initially, then revised upward. Not stations. Architecture. The kind of structures you build when you've had time to stop thinking of space as empty and start thinking of it as a construction site. Orbital rings laced with gravitational arrays. Defensive platforms that didn't bother concealing their weapons because concealment was, apparently, a concern for civilizations that weren't certain they could win. An armada holding formation beyond the outer belt, vast and unhurried, the way oceans are vast and unhurried. His sensor array was calibrated for Concorde standard threats. It required recalibration 4 times in the first hour. This was, he would later note in his official report, suboptimal. The communication had come from Envoy Alara Vance. Her Concorde standard was flawless, which was interesting because the last known Terran contact with Concorde civilization had been 1,000 years ago, when humanity had been a species with one world, one system, and the sort of hopeful ambition that made everyone else in the galaxy mildly nervous. Her pronunciation was perfect. Slightly formal, in the way of someone speaking a language they learned from historical records rather than living speakers. She invited him to land. He landed. The surface of Terra Nova was the part that broke his calibration for good. He'd expected a civilization 1,000 years advanced over their last contact point. The Terrans had not advanced 1,000 years. What the chronostasis vault had done, and he would spend the first 20 minutes on the surface misunderstanding what it had done, was collapse the relationship between interior time and exterior time into something the Physics Division's 17 models had not covered. Inside the sealed Aegis system, while 1 millennium passed for the rest of the galaxy, 100,000 years had passed for Terra Nova. 100,000 years. He stood in a city that had been rebuilt and reimagined and outgrown and rebuilt again so many times that the original architecture existed only in museums, and the museums themselves were older than most Concorde civilizations. The air tasted clean. The sky was wrong in a way he couldn't immediately identify, too sharp, too deep. The atmosphere managed so precisely that weather was apparently a choice rather than a condition. Envoy Vance was waiting for him on the landing platform. She was smaller than he'd expected. She extended her hand. He had read about this gesture in the xenobiology briefings. An archaic Terran greeting. Open palm, no weapon, offered freely. He did not know what to do with it. He stood there for a moment longer than was professionally elegant, his primary appendages doing nothing in particular. She waited. No adjustment. No withdrawal. He reached out and took her hand. "Welcome to Terra Nova, Captain," she said. "We've been looking forward to this." He had a number of questions. He kept them to himself. This was, in retrospect, good practice for everything that followed. The presentation at the Galactic Concorde Citadel lasted 4 hours. Valen had attended Concorde sessions before. They were, as a rule, exercises in procedural endurance. This one was different. The Terrans had brought an architect memory prism, a data storage medium from a civilization so old that the Concord's archaeological division had spent 2 centuries arguing about whether the architects had existed at all. The prism sat on the presentation dais and pulsed with light that didn't behave the way light was supposed to. And nobody in the chamber said anything about it because there was nothing useful to say. Envoy Vance presented the Terran terms for independent alliance, sovereignty, non-interference, mutual defense. The language was precise and left no gaps for interpretation. Valen sat 3 rows back and watched the Concord delegates process the fact that humanity had returned, and that humanity had returned with the kind of patience that only comes from knowing exactly what's coming. The memory prism's data was explicit. The void swarm, not a new threat, an old one, cyclical. The architects had fought them and lost, and the last thing the architects had done before they were consumed was hide the record of what the swarm was and how it moved and what it needed. The Terrans had found that record. They had spent 100,000 years building an answer. Warlord Kale's 300 Tarkin warships arrived at the Aegis System perimeter on the 3rd day of negotiations. Valen received the alert mid-session. The warships decelerated toward Terranova's outer defense grid and then stopped. Not by choice. The gravitational arrays didn't fire a warning shot. There was no warning shot. The entire Tarkin armada simply became stationary, held in place by forces that didn't require any visible mechanism, and Warlord Kale transmitted 17 increasingly hostile communications before the Terrans responded. The response was brief. It pointed out that the warships had been held rather than destroyed, and that this distinction was intentional. Inquisitor Xylo received his data drive during the recess. Overseer Nix Corvo handed it across a conference table without ceremony. The drive contained, as best Valen later understood, documentation of every Concord network the Terrans had accessed during their isolation. Every intelligence channel, every military frequency, every diplomatic backchannel going back 400 years. Valen had been about to recommend standard non-disclosure review procedures when the proximity alert reached every bridge simultaneously. The void swarm had breached the galactic edge. Oakhaven was gone in 6 hours. The entire Tarkin mining outpost. He reviewed the sensor footage once and did not review it again. The word biomass appeared 14 times in the initial report. He noted the stain on his uniform sleeve at some point during the review. He focused on that for longer than was professionally appropriate. The Aegis bulwark held. Terran and Concord vessels established the combined perimeter in under 9 hours, which was fast, and the Terrans had clearly been planning the logistics since before the alliance was formally signed, which was either admirable or concerning depending on your disposition. Valen had filed a note about it. He suspected the note would not change anything. The Devourer dreadnought came through the bulwark's northern corridor. It was absorbing a Concord frigate squadron when the Tarkin formation broke. 50 warships. Reactors past critical. Accelerating. He understood it watching the telemetry. Oakhaven had been Tarkin. The colonists had been Tarkin. What the swarm had made of them was also, technically, still Tarkin in the way that a door is still a tree. Warlord Kale had not asked permission. He had looked at his 300 ships and done the arithmetic and arrived at 50, and the 50 had not hesitated. The dreadnought came apart from the inside. Not cleanly. Nothing about it was clean. The biomass arrays were still extending when the last reactor detonated. And the shockwave reached Valen's bridge 14 seconds later and rattled something loose in the ceiling paneling. He filed a maintenance request. I need to start that sentence over. He sat on his bridge and listened to the damage reports and did not file anything for approximately 3 minutes. The swarm's advance column fragmented. The bulwark held. Envoy Vance boarded his ship 2 hours after the engagement. She walked onto his bridge and looked at the ceiling panel that was hanging slightly loose and didn't comment on it. He appreciated that. The alliance is formalized, she said. Your signature completes it. The Genesis engine, Valen said. She didn't answer immediately. Outside the viewport, the bulwark's combined fleet was already repositioning for the next wave. Terran vessels moved through the formation with that specific unhurried quality he'd noticed when he first arrived in the Aegis system. Not slowness. Certainty. It exists, she said finally. It would end this. It would end quite a lot of things. He looked at her. She was watching the fleet. The same woman who had extended her hand on that landing platform, open palm, no weapon, and waited while he stood there failing to respond like a competent diplomatic representative of the Concord. You've had it the entire time, he said. Yes. And you built the bulwark instead. She turned then, and something moved behind her eyes that he couldn't classify. Not pride exactly. Something older than pride. Something that had been carried a long time. Sign the document, Captain, she said. There's more work to do. He picked up the stylus. Outside, the vanguard of the combined fleet was already moving toward the galactic edge, toward the dark and what lived in it, toward whatever came next. He signed.